We're up to episode 6, and we're going to talk about compression. Previous episode, we talked about tools that influence cellular health. Did you have any questions or key takeaways from that episode?
Yeah, I do have one question, which is, can you tell us more about PEMF? Because it's a kind of technology. I know it's not been around recently, it's been around for a while, but I think it's very new to our audience over here.
Yeah, so it's coming into the spotlight, I would say, in our part of the world. However, it's been around for 50 years. It was actually invented in the Eastern Bloc countries back in the days when there was, communist Germany and so on and so forth. So it may not have got found out that quickly because of it, but it was used for athlete recovery. If we go back to where the genesis of the technology, it was discovered by Nikola Tesla, who discovered that certain magnetic forces actually are beneficial to the human body, beneficial in a number of different ways. The major benefit is in removal of inflammation, or having a anti-inflammatory effect to speed up the healing process. There is also benefits in a metabolic conditioning as well. We just talked offline earlier, you talked about absorption of key trace elements as well.
So PEMF, from what the research has shown, is that it helps to improve calcium intake output, as well as the nitric oxide as well. When it comes to calcium and performance, basically every time you contract muscle, it's always about calcium being released. So definitely plays a part in performance. Another thing is that it helps in nitric oxide as well. So as you know, especially in the realm of gym users, nitric oxide supplements are really popular because they help to create a pump. But what people don't realize is not the pump during the training that's valuable, but it's the pump after it's for the recovery. And PEMF really helps in this span of calcium and nitric oxide.
So PEMF is one of 5 technologies we've built into the Biomat, knowing that we've built it into that convenient form factor so that it's available and usable at home, knowing that the key component in recovery is whatever is convenient will get repeated, and whatever gets repeated will make a difference. So the mats do at a cellular level are promoting detox, are promoting cellular health, and now we want to talk about the circulation side of recovery. So let's talk about the history of compression and its use, first of all, from in the medical world. So the first aspect of compression that became known through the medical world and crossed over into the athlete world was the compression sock. This is a form of static compression. So it's generally between 6 and 20 mmHg of pressure. So if you imagine a blood pressure cuff that's putting a certain amount of pressure in order to record data, while a compression sock is at the ankle would be around 20 mmHg of pressure and around 6 at the top around the knee. So it's helping to promote blood flow. However, it's only promoting blood flow in one direction if you're static. So it doesn't work in a pumping motion until you're moving. Is it effective? From an athletic point of view, there's a lot of people that use compression socks as kind of a placebo. So I think the benefit in that is, if you believe it works, use it. However, from a medical point of view, because we work with the vascular world, vascular surgeons and vascular practitioners, their philosophy is you're not going to get any worse wearing a compression garment, or like a calf sleeve, for example. However, you're not going to get much better either, because they're one directional and in a static sense. If you're just sitting there wearing it, it is not promoting that pumping motion that we're looking for to promote and speed up recovery. So let's take a look at active compression or intermittent pneumatic compression, which is shortened to IPC. So it's been around more than 30 years in the medical world and has been used to as a form of recovery aid in hospitals for DVT, post-surgery recovery, and so on. It's also been used to treat diabetic patients who have issues with circulation. So diabetes manifests itself in the peripheral of the body shutting down. So the capillaries in the hands and feet, for example, are very fine. That's why people feel cold in their hands and feet. They're very fine for a reason, in order to create and encourage backflow of the blood from the furthest most point back. So in the case of an illness like diabetes, the capillaries start to shut down. It can get very dangerous to the point of the limb having to be amputated because it actually dies. So the boots are creating a pumping motion. So if we just take a look at the graphic, and pushing the blood into the lymphatic system, which is the kidneys and liver and so on, where it's extracting the metabolic waste. It's your body's filtration system. And then on the release, each minute it will release for around 20 seconds, and fresh blood is flowing back in order to speed up the healing, recovery, fresh nutrient delivery, and ultimately we're looking for gains if we're using this in a athletic sense. So they're two quite different techniques. So active trumps passive by quite a long way in terms of its effectiveness. So I mentioned that it had been discovered in the medical world. It crossed over into the athlete world more than 10 years ago, and there are various versions and iterations of this type of device. So they differentiate themselves by functionality, by the type of cuff that you have, and also other variables like recovery modes, battery versus non-battery, and so on. So let's take a look at 5 reasons for using active compression. The first is warm-up. So 8 minutes on the boots is worth 30 to 40 minutes on a treadmill or on a bike, for example. So you're pushing your muscle oxygen up to a point that would normally take you 30 to 40 minutes to get to in just 8 minutes. So this is a great warm-up hack for busy people, because I don't know about you and your clients, not many people have 30 or 40 minutes to put in for in terms of putting in a proper warm-up. So would you see this as being really beneficial to people?
Definitely. It definitely saves on the warm-up time, so we can get straight to work, and they can even use it before the session begins. So it's 1 full hour of just training.
Yeah, so in doing so, there's also a much lower metabolic cost. So if in a scenario of going into a key race and preparing for a key race, it might be a running race or maybe an online bike race like Zwift, doing 8 to 10 minutes on the boots is a great way to prime your vascular system so that you're ready to go when the gun goes off. So have you ever had any examples where you didn't warm up properly going into a race, and what happened?
So I was doing the race in Tour de Bintan, and my teammates were all warming up for a good 45 minutes or so. I woke up late, just jumped on the bike, I went for the race, and right from the get-go it was an attack. So if you're not in a cycling realm, an attack means everyone's just dashing right from the start, right? So that's one of the strategies that they sometimes use, and my legs definitely didn't like it. It was really hard for me to make a comeback from the attack, and if I had used the boots back then for 8 minutes, it would save me so much time knowing that I woke up late and stuff like that.
So a lot of the national cycling team have our boots, and recently we had the time trial and the team's time trial here in Singapore. So one of our customers actually sent me a picture. He was being driven to the time trial by his parents. he's sitting in the back seat with the boots on. So a great way to prepare for the race. And it meant his actual bike time to get the biomechanical motion working needed to be, was allowed to be a lot less than it otherwise would have, because time trial is an all-out effort. So he definitely got to that point without burning too many matches. So it's a great biohack. So you notice in the picture that I've got a baseline here. So we're pushing that in 8 minutes up above what it would normally take 30 to 40 minutes. Beyond that point, there's a parasympathetic benefit. There's that squeeze and release is doing and mimicking the body's natural process of eliminating and delivering back to the muscles the fresh nutrients. So beyond that 10 to 15 minutes, the parasympathetic system is kicking in. So your body's going into rest and digest. So just to understand the benefits of going longer as well. So let's look at a use case for that longer recovery, and that would be recovery and sleep. So training makes you worse, recovery makes you better. Let's talk to that graph again. So we talked about this in the episode of exercise and sleep. So let's talk to that graph again, just as a refresher, Myren.
So this is great because I actually just presented on this in terms of our tutorial yesterday on this graph called the SRA curve. The SRA curve is the stimulus, recovery, and adaptation curve. The very important part to take note of is that the recovery curve, which is right from the deficit all the way to the peak of the supercompensation curve, and that's where recovery takes place. And you notice that the deficit curve, that's where the stimulus have been introduced, and that deficit is basically the fatigue that's causing a drop in your performance. So you notice that the recovery curve is always longer than the stimulus curve, and it should always be that way, because recovery line minus the stimulus line is what we call the trainability line, and that's where you adapt and become better. So doing too much or having really poor recovery, so let's talk about doing too much first. By doing too much, you actually drop that deficit curve way too low to the point that you may not be able to recover from the training stimulus. And if you have poor recovery, you basically shorten the recovery line, which again makes you unable to get the full benefits of the adaptation from the deficit in terms of the stimulus that you're introducing to the body.
Right, very good summary. So the recovery period beyond that warm-up phase that we talked about in the previous slide is allowing the body to enter into that rest and digest. So we notice that most people fall asleep, even if they've just come off a key race and they're in the recovery tent with us. They're dying to talk to their friends about the race and compare notes. 5 minutes later, they're fast asleep. So it can happen quite quickly after a major, say, triathlon, stage race in cycling, maybe a marathon. So people go into that rest and digest state. So we saw this happening, and we constantly get reports back from our athletes saying it really helps me to sleep. And we were very curious about this. So we teamed up with a scientist from the Mind Lab, and we measured the neural response plus the biometrics. And it actually confirmed, so here we have a professional boxer wearing the neural device that's picking up brainwave patterns. He also has a device on him to measure basal, heart rate, temperature, SBO, and so on. So the findings were actually just confirm what we already know, that the body is going into a rested state. There's an improvement in HRV, respiratory rate slows down. The body's going into that wonderful state of healing. So kind of good to confirm what we already knew with a bit of science. We did the same test, by the way, with the biomats and got a very similar response. So that's also good. So in this case, Abdu, who's a professional boxer from the ring, is lying on the biomat. We actually disconnected the biomat for this test because we're focusing on boots only, but previously he did a test on the biomat alone without the boots. So similar results, which is good to see. So the third of our use cases, so warm up, recovery, sleep. So the fourth one, rehab. So sooner or later, accidents happen. Maybe you twist an ankle or you sprain a knee. So remember back from our series on ice where we myth busted ice for general recovery as being a bad thing. However, in the case of trauma, it is a good thing because it's controlling bleeding and it's also a form of pain relief. So putting an ice pack inside the boot, zipping it up, and then having the pressure down nice and low is a great way to promote ICT, ice compression therapy, where you're getting that pain relief and bleeding control to get you over that period and then into a phase where you can do some rehab with your physiotherapist. Any thoughts or comments?
I guess one thing that we didn't mention as well, with regards to this is not really outside of rehab or inside of rehab, but the boots actually help in terms of orthostatic hypotension. So someone that who gets up feeling dizzy most of the time, studies have showed that orthostatic hypotension is actually the boots actually help because it's actually one of the most effective things rather than medication to actually eliminate this kind of feeling.
Yep. That's great. We always would rather take a non-drug route to therapy and recovery, so that's a very good point. So also from a rehab point of view, you also have scenarios where, say, somebody's had an ACL operation. So and there'd be so as part of the rehab process and ongoing, the use of the boots is great for promoting blood flow in places that are on a low blood supply area of the body. So namely knees, ankles, hips and shoulders and so on are a low blood supply area. They're not on a major arterial route. So by promoting, because of the pressure of the boots, by promoting blood into those areas, you're really giving the injury or the surgery a great chance to heal, to lay down collagen and improve and heal a lot faster. Plus, of course, using it as a warm-up, it's a preventative method and protocol in order to keep things viable. So we had, I know one of our Spartan racer customers unfortunately had an ACL surgery and recovered really well from it. She was using our boots, but I did note that she rehabbed really well. So the boots don't replace proper rehab. And also kudos to her, she was very patient with her recovery, because quite often if people try and shortcut their recovery, they end up back in trouble. So the boots definitely have a role to play. So as recently as yesterday, a gentleman tried our boots and he'd recently had an ACL operation. So he was on the boots for 20 minutes and then he took them off and stood up and he said, "Oh, my legs feel great." Then he went down into a full squat. Previously, he couldn't do this. His knee wouldn't let him, and so he was amazed at the difference was night and day. So blood flow is a wonderful thing. Blood flow brings healing. So that's what we're focusing on with the boots. With the mat, of course, we're dealing at a cellular level with detox and cellular regeneration. So great combination. So that's rehab. So I would say that the boots are a wonderful thing. However, they're not an excuse to overtrain. And that just because you have the ability to recover better, there's a correct level of training stimulus. You recently talked about this on your own social media, on your tutorial. How about we discuss that again at this point? Appropriate levels.
Yeah. So just remember that the more you do, the bigger of the deficit that you're bringing yourself into in terms of the curve of stimulus. And the bigger the deficit, the harder it is to recover. Whenever it comes to training, it's very, very important that you just want to do the minimal effective volume to try and achieve the outcome that you want, and not doing more. More is not better. More looks good on social media, but it really doesn't do anything. It's good to boast, but end of the day, you're just going to recover poorly. So it's always about increasing the trainability factor, and that the only way to do that is to do the least amount of work to achieve the proper outcome.
Yeah, that's a very tricky one. So we're all influenced, unfortunately, by this thing called FOMO, and social media is a very bad influencer to us in that regard. So personally, I always found it hard to find that line. As I've gotten older and I've been through my share of injuries, I have a philosophy where I may cut a set short. So rather than do those last 2 reps, I might stop 2 reps earlier, knowing that is enough. And particularly with highly beneficial exercise like deadlifts, where I know my form is deteriorating because I'm fatiguing, I'll stop. Stay out of the surgeon's office.
There are 3 ways. It's good that you talk about that, because there are 3 ways in which you can tell whether your performance is suffering, or rather it's you're doing too much, basically. Number 1, are you getting better session after session? Does it feel easier? Because the minute it doesn't feel easier and it actually feels harder, that's the first sign that you're overtraining. The second one is that your HRV is way too high, or it's increasing way past your baseline. So you got to take your baseline HRV and you take it again 3 days later on, and you start to notice that, if it's way past your baseline, you know that you're just overdoing the training as well. And the third one is when you start to lose your appetite. That's another sign that you're overtraining. You're doing way too much.
Yeah, really, really good points. So when I was coaching, when my athletes, because I coached a bunch of type A's, they were very hard to corral and to keep within the boundaries of healthy. So when I would get a message from one of those athletes saying, "Hey coach, I'm calling a rest day on myself," I would give them a round of applause, because I know that they're now tuning into their body. And so I've done a good job as a coach when they don't train, when they've called that rest day on themselves.
Yeah.
I think that shows a level of exercise intelligence, which is different to IQ, because we know a lot of bright people that do some dumb things. So exercise intelligence, very, very important to tune into that. All right, so that's rehab. So the fifth reason or use case for the compression boots is travel. Sooner or later, hopefully, we're going to be able to travel again. So maybe it's to a key event like a Spartan race, or a multi-sport challenge, or a triathlon. And the moment we step onto the plane, maybe you've trained for a key race like Hawaii Ironman. You've trained 10 months to prepare for that race because you know you've qualified and you've done everything perfectly. You followed your coach's plan to the letter. You got on top of your nutrition. You prepared beautifully. Then you step onto the plane, cabin door closes, and the edema starts, the swelling starts. The reason why it does start, the moment the cabin door closes, the cabin pressure drops. Have you ever noticed that people fall asleep when the cabin door shuts?
Always.
So there's probably a number of reasons for that. You've rushed to get to the plane, and finally you sit down and you can relax. But actually, the real reason is that the air pressure, the SPO, drops from around 98 or 99% to 94. So your body's natural response will be to feel sleepy. The second response is that your body's producing edema or swelling. So if we look at this adventure racer, Dougal Allen. So Dougal's a very famous adventure racer. He's globally well known. He's the multiple winner of the Coast to Coast, which is a major multi-sport endurance race, which happens to be in New Zealand. But Dougal travels internationally for races. The moment he gets on the plane, his ankles turn into cankles. So this is a very fit guy with a good vascular system and so on, but his body really responds badly to that pressure change, and so do a lot of people. So this is a good thing to leave no stone unturned. If you're going to a key race, last thing you want to have happen is leg swelling. But even in a general sense, for air travel, using the boots on the plane is a good protocol. You can actually use them regardless of what part of the plane you're seated in. You don't necessarily need to be in business class or in a part of the plane with a lot of leg room. You can actually sit in economy class with in a seated position using the boots. So recently we supplied the Singapore Olympic team. So our guidance was to, even though the Olympics being in Japan, it's around about a 6-hour flight to Tokyo. So we encouraged them to use the boots 20 to 30 minutes every hour to an hour and a half in order to stay on top of the swelling, so that when they reached, their body had the least amount of adverse effect from the swelling. Because, obviously you trained for 4 years or 5 years in this case for the Olympics, for a key event. And the last thing you want to do is at the last hurdle, you have obstacles put in your way that you can avoid. So using the boots on a plane is a very good thing. It's also very good if folks are prone to DVT, a deep vein thrombosis, which can be a very dangerous thing to have happen, because you can get blood clotting that can be very dangerous to your cardiovascular system. So it's a good preventative tool for folks that may be predisposed to that. So I want to look at common themes amongst people that get the most out of their recovery. So firstly, they understand recovery. So in the case of Dougal Allen here, the multi-sporter, All Black Lima Sapawanga, who's on a $3 million contract playing professional rugby in France. So how valuable is recovery to him? If he can extend his playing life by 1 year, that's worth $1 million. So he's very fussy and fastidious and ritualized about his recovery, because he knows that that's valuable to his family and his extended family. So he's of Pacifica origin. So just like Asian families, their family is a very broad picture of grandparents, cousins, and so on. So you're not just making money for yourself in that sense. You're actually supporting a whole lot of people. So taking care of himself is very important. Stand-up paddleboarders Seaman and Sijaya Cheng also are busy professional people who are on their feet all day. They're both in the medical world. One's a occupational therapist, the other's a nurse. So they're on their feet all day. Yeah. It's a very tiring thing. Plus they're doing the great work-ins, because they can't always be on the water. And when they are on the water, they're performing at a very high level. So recovery is a key component for them. And of course they work shift work. So shift work and being outside of your circadian rhythms will wreck you if you don't use tools to get on top of your sleep. Then Amelia Rose Watkinson, the swimmer in this picture, is a professional triathlete. Courtney Duncan, dual world motocross champion. So these are all customers of ours that are consistent. This is a ritual for them, and they're using the boots over in a multi-use sense. Warm-up, recovery, rehab. It's benefiting their sleep, and they're using it for travel. So just some resources for you. So if you scan the QR code, it'll take you to our FAQ. Our FAQ has best practices for using our recovery products. And guess who wrote the FAQ? Yes, I did. However, a lot of our athletes from different sports contributed tips and tricks, because we may be domain experts in one or two sports, but it's great to have contributions from sports that we don't know a whole lot about, like fighting sports, mixed martial arts, boxing, jiu-jitsu, and so on, right across a whole lot of different sports. So it was great to have those contributions and to learn tips and tricks from other applications as well. So if you navigate, you'll see that we also have an affiliate program. So our everyday athletes are our best advocates. It's not the media stars. We do have a few media stars who are advocates or affiliates for our product, but we like everyday people to tell their story, because there's a real authenticity about how we're helping them with their passion for their exercise or sport at whatever level, and balancing across into their professional and their personal lives, making sure that recovery is optimized so that they're functioning across all areas of their lives. We've got lots of blog topics too that we're sharing, of course, with High Performance, and we're sharing High Performance's blogs on our site as well. So lots of drill downs into different sports, different applications, and different understandings of recovery in different areas. So we hope you check those out. We have a newsletter sign up there as well. We do hope you sign up. Periodically, we have a lucky draw for our newsletter database as well. And finally, our Instagram scanning code is here. Of course, High Performance, we encourage you to join and sign up for their newsletter and their Instagram as well. So that's the end of episode 6. We've got one left, and that's going to be a wrap up or a summary of what we've discussed over the 6 episodes. Thanks for coming with us. We hope you join us for the last episode as well.